the impossible question, and I apologize for asking it, but maybe it's just worthwhile to try to think about it, is on the grand scale of centuries of the East Roman Empire, is religion a constructive or a destructive force for the empire? Did it help it flourish, or did it hold it back?
This society identified itself increasingly with what it saw as orthodoxy. Orthodoxy just means correct belief. I mean, like every religion ultimately thinks it's orthodox, right? But that's the conventional name, right? Orthodoxy today might be called Greek Orthodoxy. And I mean, it's such an essential part of the culture. It really is. I can't think of the two of them I mean, I try to, because as a historian, I have to test the models, and try to see these things as independent of each other. But ultimately, it's very difficult to disentangle them. And I would say that to the degree that this is a successful society historically, that its religion definitely contributed to that and played a role in it. Not without cost, right? It mattered to them. They valued it. But things that matter to you have a cost. And they paid that price. They were willing to pay that price for it. For example, at the very end, they had to choose between Catholicism, Western rule, where they essentially have to compromise on their faith, or rule by Muslims, the Turks, where they would not have to compromise their faith. And some of them were explicit that they were preferring option B, because the Turks will at least respect our identity. Like, that's a cost.
Yeah, but there's other layers like taxation and the functions of government that are connected to religion to the degree it interacts with the tax system. But it feels like that's the engine of the society, and religion is more like the cultural layer.
Yeah, so this is why I said that I try in thinking of the models that we use to understand the society, not to assume that religion is everywhere and for everything. Now, I have colleagues who do that, and I would disagree with them about this, but you're exactly right. There are elements of this society that I like to see as their own thing, like the Roman identity, for example. It's not the same as orthodoxy, but also the operations of the state. Those are very pragmatic things, and you see them intersect with religion largely in areas of terminology or the vocabulary that they use, or, like at the top, but not at their actual functioning. So in my field, I'm a historian who's tried to promote other aspects of the culture as having the kind of integrity of their own, and not to subsume them all within orthodoxy.
So, I mean, again, an impossible way of asking the same question. If you asked a Roman, 1,000,000 Romans across 1,000 years, are you a Roman or a Christian? What would be the answer for them?
Both. Oh, absolutely.
No, you don't get to say both. You're not allowed to do that.
Why not? It's the true answer.
Okay. So you're saying they're really tied together.
Well, they overlap, but if you were to, and this might be a somewhat more subtle conversation than most of them would want to have, but if you were to say, is Roman and Christian the same thing to you? If they thought about it for a little while, they'd quickly be able to say no, because there were, just logically, there were Christians who were not Romans, the Bulgarians or the Rus or, whoever. There were lots of Christians who were not Roman, and they did not regard them as Roman just because they were Christian. Conversely, they knew perfectly well that there had been Romans who were not Christians, and they knew this how? Because in the churches, almost every week, they celebrated martyrs who had been killed by the Roman emperors in the past. And there was like the performance of violence by Roman emperors against Christians was like something they remember. They knew perfectly well. So those two things did not overlap perfectly. And there were some contexts in which you would be more Roman, and there were some contexts in which you would be more Christian. And you find characters who, and I love to do this, I find characters who, as some sources say, we didn't pay too much attention to Christian things. Like, there's just politicians, they were just doing their work. And then you find characters who, like, devote themselves They go all in on orthodoxy and like monasticism and things. They just don't care about the Roman stuff at all. And that is, in fact, part of the reason why I like this society is because it has these kinds of options for people to choose. And there's another one. There's the Greek stuff, too, because their language is Greek, their literature is Greek. And so there are people in the society who go all in on the Greek stuff, right? And I see this society as this kind of laboratory of these three elements coexisting in these fascinating combinations. Usually it's combinations, right? But sometimes you'll find people who are like kind of try to be purists in one way or another. And it's the only society in history in which you can do this, because it's the only society that's Roman and Christian and Greek, but in different ways, right?
And unfortunately, I think it's tempting, but it's probably impossible to say if we remove the taxation system, would Roman Empire be more or less successful? If we removed religion, would it be more or less successful?
Right.
If we removed Greek and kept it Latin all the way through, would it be more or less successful? It's probably impossible to do this kind of analysis because they're all so deeply integrated.
And fundamentally, it also wouldn't be what it was. It would be something different.
But there is a big temptation, and this is at the core of your work, and to understand why did the East Roman Empire last as long as it did? And why did the broader Roman Empire last as long as it did?
Yeah.
Because it is one of, if not the most successful empires in terms of duration and stability in a very tense part of the world.